suggest, I'm Dennis Potter. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. And I've been doing this a while. As a matter of fact, as I look over the crowd, I've been doing this longer than any of you been alive. Right? So apparently I've either been able to strike some kind of reasonable life-work balance, or I'm just incredibly stupid. And I leave it to you to kind of figure that out. I started my workout as a public welfare worker for Muskegon County and then here in Kent County. And as part of that, worked with child welfare. So I was working with kids who were struggling and to stay in school, stay at home, those kind of things. Went to Ann Arbor for my master's degree and spent 2.5 years working at W.J. Maxey Boys Training School, residential program for young men who got in trouble with the law. After graduation, I went up to the UP and hung out in Escanaba for a few years, working in the school system with kids, with the Escanaba and Gladstone Public Schools. And it was on a special grant. When the grant was done, I moved south all the way to Alpena, which for those of you who don't know is kind of up here. And I took over a girls' group home, 12-bed group home for girls. That was far more exciting than working at Maxey Training School, because there's nothing quite like working with females. To keep any good day to kind of an okay day to a good day. And then we expanded and created a group home for adults with developmental disabilities. I eventually became executive director there, so got involved with foster care, got involved with adoption, got involved with more traditional life services. Eventually lived there and came back to Grand Rapids for a home intervention program. So I worked at what was then the Child Guidance Clinic, now part of Arbor Circle. A few years later, I moved again, and I went to work for Community Mental Health to create what is now their Access Center. So I was the first program director that brought a bunch of services that were out in the private sector under the umbrella of Community Mental Health. A few years later, they needed a new case management agency for adults with severe and persistent mental illness. So I took on the task of creating that Spectra Case Management. And we were doing that for about 10 years or so. Then we merged 3 case management agencies into what was then Touchstone, which later merged into what is now Cherry Street Health. So I got the chance to work with adults with severe and persistent mental illness. Then somewhere around 2006, when I was going through my 3rd or 4th midlife crisis, I kind of lost track of them over the years, and I probably got to stop calling them midlife. I'm fairly certain that ship has sailed, hopefully not a long time ago, but well past the midway point. And I was taking stock of my work-life balance and decided that I wanted to end my career back having fun. And I'd been an administrator for some 20-odd years at that point. And when I took stock of what I really liked to do, I liked doing therapy, I liked doing training, and I liked doing mentoring. And that was about the time that social workers became licensed. And so all of you LLMSWs who then needed licensed supervision, I got a chance. I quit my day job and went to work for what was then Life Guidance Services, which is now part of Cherry Health. As an outpatient therapist a few days a week, I expanded the training and consulting business that I've had for a number of years, and I opened up to do social work licensing supervision. So I managed to carve together exactly what I wanted to do for a number of years. And then, of course, as things happen, we had a change in leadership, and they asked me to take on a role of clinical supervision. So I needed to move from 3 days a week to 4. And then we had CARF coming, so they needed me to move from 4 days a week to 5. I still maintained my a small caseload. I still maintain the licensing supervision. Plus, I got to work with MSW interns. So I was still carving out, wanting to do what was kind of fun. So when the merger came to Cherry Street, I decided it was time to go back to, again, more clinical work. And so I went back to work for Network 180 in a Spectrum Health Center for Integrated Medicine, in which we worked with folks who had 10 or more visits to a Spectrum ED in the previous year. So frequent flyers. Most frequent flyer we had was a young woman who had 422 visits to the ED in the previous 365 days. My first social work instinct was, let's just get her a room. Cheaper than having all the ambulance things back and forth. But what we discussed, and of course when I talk about frequent flyers coming out of the mental health, what was I expecting? I was expecting folks that were homeless, I was expecting folks who were mentally ill, and I was expecting folks who had addiction problems, right? And that was 17% of the folks we saw. 83% of the folks we saw did not fall in that category. They were getting inadequate physical health care, didn't have a primary health care physician, was using the ED as a way to treat a chronic physical illness. So our job was to figure out kind of what was going on. It was much more intensive and truly integrated health care. They had to see us every visit. They had, along with seeing the doctor, which was weekly, because it was a very intense physical health program. Got to see clients sometimes with the doc, and we would sit and have mutual sessions with the patients together. It was really a tremendously learning opportunities. From there, I had a chance to go to Crisis Care Network. Part of my expertness over the years has been in critical incident stress, responding after trauma events. So I got to do that for a while, and then 2 years ago, decided I was ready not to work full-time. I was ready to go to part-time, and had the opportunity of joining Encompass. So that's kind of how I came here today. In trying to, throughout all of those various experiences of foster care, of residential, of treatment kind of things, and working with folks that not only have mental health and or physical health problems, but also have life problems that come along with being impoverished, in poverty, come along with the unemployment, come along with the kind of culture that helping kids try to escape those things to become the most productive people that they can become. As Nina pointed out, is incredibly important work that you do. And it's incredibly difficult, because most of the successes that we might have with young people, we never get to see. But we sure see our failures pretty dang quick. Recidivism and rape, they come back, they get in trouble, we see them on the news, and so on and so forth. So the payoff, the successes that we have, oftentimes are pretty invisible. So we have to create some of that for ourselves and measure success in ways that we can do happy dances on a regular basis, and not just for big kind of events. So how do we find that kind of balance, if you will? Work-life balance is this important for our lives, but also part of our whole work environment. And maintaining a balance. Now, when we talk about a balance, we have a tendency to think about things being equal. And sometimes that happens, but usually one is more than the other. It doesn't have to be perfect. What it has to be is satisfactory to you, satisfactory to your partners, satisfactory to your family, satisfactory to your job. Because we have this thinking sometimes in our world in which we think what happens at work stays at work, what happens at home stays at home, and never the two will mix. And I got and a highly scientific phrase for that. It's called bovine excrement. Okay? Whatever's going on at work, we bring some of it home. Whatever's going on at home, we bring some of it to work. Okay? So we need to be aware of where our stressors kind of are, where the demands being made on us, and what can we do about those to maintain a certain feeling of balance, a certain feeling of equilibrium. Okay? It helps reduce stress at work, helps reduce stress at home, and works hard towards preventing kind of burnout on the job. We talk about finding career balance, and I got news for you, you're not going to find it. Because finding it implies that it's out there someplace. Finding it implies that it's someone else's responsibility. Now, my challenge to you is you have to create it for you. Create it in your world, based on who you are, based on your personality, based on who you want to be, not just who you are today, but who do you want to be in 5 years, in 10 years, or when you get old like me. Okay? So the idea here is to take charge of and be responsible for. Because unfortunately, the only one who is responsible for managing the stress in our lives are us. And taking whatever actions we need to take to bring that sense of balance, that sense of equilibrium to ourselves. So where does it come? Well, stress comes everywhere. Okay? It's a necessary part of human life. If we didn't have it, we wouldn't operate very well. Right? And we are not geared, physiologically, we are not geared to live in the 21st century. Our stress response is extremely primitive. It's back to earliest hominoids that climbed out of the caves or got kicked out of the Garden of Eden, wherever your spiritual traditions want to start from. Okay? And it's biologically prepared, theoretically, for fairly long periods of low stress and short periods of high stress situations, fight-flight situations. But in today's world, we have things that give us stress reactions all the time. May I borrow this a second? This is one of the most stress-inducing pieces of life that we have, because we have to have them on our desk in front of us, we have to have them on our hip, in our back pockets. Every time and most of us, when we put it on the table in front of us, we put it glass side up, so that when it lights up, we have to look. How important is it? Okay. Or if it's vibrating, gotta look at it. I'm old enough to remember when we first got voicemail. And boy, were we excited, because before we had voicemail at work, you'd come back to your desk and there'd be a stack of pink slips. Not to get you laid off, but they were pink slips, little message slips. And they would have a name and number, please call. They usually didn't have any information on it besides that. So then you'd have to call the person, and they'd tell you what they wanted, and then you'd have to go figure out what it is, you'd get the information and call them back. Voicemail, you would tell me what you needed, and I would get it, and then I would call you back. Fantastic. How many of you hate voicemail? Yeah, I hate voicemail now. First of all, I tell you, leave your phone number slowly so I will get it on the first go around. And that's exactly the way it's on my, and I'm now about to amend it. Leave it slowly, because if I don't get it on the first time, I ain't calling you back. I'm putting it on you. I don't want to listen to you blab on for 2 to 3 minutes, and I have to listen to it 4 times in order to get all the numbers to call you back. Give me a break. Add stress. Okay, so then we got email. Oh, fantastic. Now I can kind of take a quick look, store those that, urgent, not urgent, those I'm going to ignore, those I'm going to get back. Okay, with voicemail, theoretically, you had 24 to 48 hours to respond, kind of was the expectation. Now we have email, and the expectation is the same day. Then who made up the rules for text? That you got to respond in the next 30 seconds. Who made up that? And why is it that we feel obligated to follow that? So these technological improvements that were to create less stress in our life, in fact, create more pressure, create the same kind of primitive stress response that our earliest ancestors had, but at a whole different level. Why is it anytime I'm driving someplace and running a little late, every idiot driver's on the road? Especially the fool sitting in front of me with his right turn blinker on. There's no sign about no turn on red. There is no cross traffic. And why are we sitting here? So internally, my stress response around that is a life and death situation when in fact it probably isn't. So that's what I mean. We're not really geared to live in the 21st century physiologically. So we have to be paying attention to those things that cause our stress reactions, and what are we going to do about it? Okay? So creating life balance. Here's our burnout mantra, if you will. We, the unwilling, led by the unknowing, are doing the impossible for the ungrateful. We've been doing it for so long, with so little, we're now qualified to do almost anything with absolutely nothing. You ever feel like that in your work day? Where the needs of the kids, the needs of the families keep coming, and never enough resources. I've been at this a long time. There's never enough resources. There are never going to be enough resources. It's a given. F. Scott Peck wrote a book many years ago called The Road Less Traveled. And I don't remember much about the book, but I remember his opening statement. His opening statement had to do with stress. And it had to do with expectations. And he started the book out saying, life is hard. Life is hard. And the sooner we accept that life is hard, the sooner it is we can begin to enjoy it. His point being, when we spend all of our time lamenting that life is hard, we're on the negative side and digging a hole. If we accept that life is hard, then we can begin to look for those moments of enjoyment. And that was a powerful piece of information. I don't remember anything else about the book. I remember that opening up. But once you accept that life is hard, life is difficult, work is difficult, never going to be enough resources, then I don't have to lament that. I have to figure out how do I work with what I have available to me today. So chronic stress is prolonged stress that is inescapable, and inescapable at least in our minds. Okay? And one of the most common health issues for mental health workers in our field. It leads to physical consequences. 67% of visits to the physical care doctors today are a result of stress-related illnesses. 67%. Okay? Stress-related illnesses, stress-exacerbated illnesses. Okay? Chronic stress can negatively impact our mental health because it's linked obviously to a higher risk of depression, anxiety, and insomnia. Too much stress over a long period of time leads to burnout. So what are our challenges? Where are our whoops, didn't mean to do that. Where are our batteries starting to run low? Okay. Well, in the back of your handouts, there's a picture of a head, I think. I didn't look. No, she didn't print those. All right. So, what's on your mind? On the very, is the very back lane? Yeah, you can use that. So, what are some of the stressors going on in your life right now? We make two columns: personal and professional. So, what are some of the demands being made on you? Write them down. You're not going to have to show them to anybody. You can hide them from your next door neighbor. I want you to kind of make a list here. What kind of demands are being on you? Personally, professionally. Too high caseloads, too much